The Olympics are here, and everybody thinks about, well, these guys are at the peak of their game. They're at the top of their game. They're the best of the best of the best of the best. But what do the best of the best of the best of the best need to be fueling their bodies with to really be the best of the best of the best of the best of the best? Well, I'll tell you what they don't need to be fueling their bodies with, and that is dairy. And today on the program, we have somebody who can speak to that from experience because she has been up there on the Olympic podium herself. She is an extraordinary cyclist. She is the co founder of Switch for Good. She is just all around, just a badass woman. Dotsie Bausch, welcome back to the exam room.
Thanks for having me back. I love your work. I love what you do. I'm always happy to spend time with you.
And likewise, my friend, and this has to be a super exciting time for you. The game's going on right now over in Tokyo. It's got to just conjure up all kinds of feels for you.
Yeah, I know. It's always an exciting time. I got super addicted to watching Olympic trials, like just track and field and swimming and cycling. And I got the pleasure and the honor to announce the USA Cycling Olympic team. And there's so much nostalgia there. And I was just so motivated by all the athletes that are focused on going to Tokyo and giving it their all. I was feeling sorry for them, this Olympics going to suck. There's no opening ceremonies, no closing, you can't really hang out in the village. There's no spectators, period, in the stands. But you know what? They turned my frown upside down because they are all just hyper focused on going to do their thing and compete. And they just feel quite grateful, honestly, that it's happening, right? Because for a while there, they didn't even know if this year was going to happen. So they just, all of them, whether they've been to the Olympics before or not, they just said, you know what, listen, it is what it is. A lot of people have suffered hard through this pandemic. And we just really feel appreciative that we're going to get to go. And yeah, it's going to be quiet stands, but quite frankly, they all said, we've been competing in front of quiet stadiums for a year. So sadly, they're kind of used to it.
I mean, yeah, that does make a lot of sense, but it's the experience. They've all been working so hard to get there, and it would be a crying shame if that just couldn't happen. So I'm all in for Tokyo. I'm glad that this is happening, and I know that they're moving mountains to try to keep everybody as healthy and as safe as possible. But let's switch gears from this Olympic Games back to your Olympic Games. What year was it that you had the privilege of standing on top of the podium, or on the podium? You got a silver medal?
Yes, it was 2012 in London.
2012 in London. Now, here's something I've always wondered. We were talking about the best of the best of the best athletes, right? And so you clearly you fall into that category. When did you really start to ramp up your training leading up to that? Because I'm thinking like MMA, Conor McGregor just fought. So you hear about like an MMA fighter. And so they really don't start training until a month or two out, right? And I assume that looking at their nutrition, that really doesn't start until that time either. How far out were you when you really started to kick things into high gear?
Well, now that you've shared that with me about the MMA fighters, I feel like I'd rather be an MMA fighter if they're not training in between fights, because I think they probably are. But that really serious high density focus is, I think, what you're talking about. But I mean, quite honestly, it was a 13-year career. There was never a time when I wasn't highly focused on the next battle, the next race, the next world championships, because all of those were the building blocks to make it to the Olympic team. So, you're starting to qualify the country, your own country's spot. A lot of people don't know that. Like, you're not necessarily qualifying. You're going to the Olympics. You have to qualify your country's spot, and then the country itself will select the athletes that will fill that spot. So we started that process, qualifying the United States in our discipline on the track a year and a half before. So I guess you could kind of say that's when it really comes into your focused sphere of this is happening, that we are going to the Olympics and I could be one of the athletes. But yeah, as a professional athlete, you're never really, cruising for a very long time. You take some time off, right, in the off season, but your feet are never really up for too long.
Sure. And that's not to say, well, I just use Conor McGregor as an example. That's not to say that they're not always, working on their fitness and trying to be healthy. I'm talking about, like camp, right? So they have this camp that they
Mm-hmm.
go to, and that's usually a month or two ahead of time. And that's when they really get that hyper focused, you know, just
Yeah.
training sessions in and kick things into high gear. But I mean, if you're doing that from
Mhm.
18 months out, I mean, good God Almighty. I mean, you got some endurance there, Dotsie.
Well, so the mental aspect, I think maybe is even more what you're talking about, that hyper focus. So I hear you now, like you're not in that realm for 18 straight months. Physically you are, right, because you're building, building, building. So you're tearing down and then you're repairing and you're getting stronger, tearing down, and that never stops. But the mental aspect of that, I worked on it really hard, maybe the last 5 years of my career, with a sports psychologist. But we went to Mallorca, Spain, the US team, so that we could be on the same time zone as London. Mallorca also provides incredible road cycling, and they have a great track there. So we spent a little over 3 months there as a team, before heading over to London. So that kind of was our, like, that camp prep that you're talking about, where literally every minute of every day is built around those 2 days in London. Like everything you're doing, everything you're eating, your entire experience, and it's intense. It was very intense, but it was also wonderful.
I'll bet. I mean, an experience like no other, an experience of a lifetime. But we can't have this here interview without talking about the food that you guys were eating. What was the typical menu like for the team at that point?
Well, my menu was a little different than
Of
my
course,
teammates' menus,
of course.
although they leaned into it quite a bit more,
Cool.
as we just a lot more, plants on their plate, because that's never a bad thing, right?
Never.
Yeah, so it was somewhat challenging in Mallorca, Spain. My husband and I are getting ready to go back for a vacation in like a month, and we can't wait to see what's changed and if there's more vegan options, and maybe even some vegan restaurants. But typical meals for me were really still how I still eat today. It's like I like to make these huge Buddha bowls. In the Game Changers film, I called them trough bowls because I ate a lot of food back then. Just they were really large. I'm holding my hands up like I'm holding a monster bowl, but it was like grains and greens and beans, legumes and seeds and nuts, and a wonderful dressing. Maybe I would do some, chopped up field roast sausages or some stir fried tofu on there, but not always. I'm not somebody who's like, I have to have a meat replacement on there. A lot of times I just would love the garbanzo beans, kidney beans, black beans, whatever it might be. And that was really easy to access because we had this absolutely phenomenal, gorgeous farmers market. We stayed in Alaro, Spain, and our balcony overlooked the Alaro town square, and every Saturday they had this farmers market that just blew my mind. I've never been to a farmers like it in the US. And as a lot of people know, the vegetables just taste different. They're just not as, they haven't gone through as many processes, and they don't spray as much crap on them over in Europe. So it just, everything basically was organic, without saying it. So we would go every Saturday and just load up, and it was just a lot of color, and a lot of food in general.
Well, yeah, it's got to be a lot of food if you're going to the trough, not just sitting down at the
Yeah.
table. You're going to the trough.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, eh, Here's one. A lot of athletes, when they first get they first have a conversation about eating plant based. One of the things that they worry about, well, there's no way I'm going to get enough calories. And I would imagine that when you're training, when you're in camp leading up to the games, like you're probably taking in more than the typical 2,000 calories a day. Was that difficult for you
Mhm.
to get to that number of calories that you needed, knowing that you were eating a more nutrient dense diet than what some would say was calorically dense? How did you find that balance?
Yeah, quite honestly, I found it difficult even before I was plant based.
Yeah.
So I was needing to take in 4 to 4,500 calories. I mean, I was burning 5 easily, sometimes more. So I needed to stay the same weight. And so sometimes I had to match it, right? So it was upwards of 5,000, 5,500 calories, which is a lot of food. And yes, it required more food as a plant-based athlete. So, I mean, now I don't feel that way at all. Like, I love food. And when people tell me, oh, I couldn't go plant-based, I'm a foodie, it's like, oh, well, you get to eat like 3 times as much food. So if you're a foodie, plant-based is for you, because you get to, really, you get to have more volume. But, back then, yes, we used to call it force feeding. It just was too much food to really ever sit down and enjoy a meal. And you have to think about the cost analysis of your digestion too, right? Because that takes energy and effort away from your body repairing and replenishing its muscle and its muscle fibers, and lung tissue and everything. So the one thing that I felt so much better on a plant-based diet was my digestion. I never felt like I never felt bloated. I never felt lethargic. I never felt heavy. I never felt like, oh gosh, I've got to take a nap to digest my meal. So that was a really cool difference. Even though I was eating a bit more volume, I just felt springy and able to just, go for a walk or go for a recovery bike ride within, 20, 30 minutes after eating a really, really large meal. And that was never the case with meat and dairy.
Oh, that's great. We're going to talk about that in depth in just a second. I mean, we're going to go ham on pardon the pun. We're going to go ham on dairy. So stay tuned for that. But I'm curious. So you're talking about this nice farmers market that you had access to in Spain. But what about when you actually got to the Olympic Village in London? Speaking in the past to Megan Duhamel, she was telling me about
Oh,
how it was sponsored by McDonald's. And basically, if you were a participant in the games, you could go and get a Big Mac 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as long as the games were going on. What was the situation like for you in London?
yeah, it is super bizarre. There is a McDonald's inside of the athlete eating hall, inside of it. And it's pretty humorous a little in terms of the beginning of the games. Like the first couple days I was there, I got there, I went to opening ceremonies. So I was there at the beginning. Mostly the line for McDonald's is filled with like coaches and trainers and mechanics, and that you're like, there's no athletes. Like at least athletes have gotten a memo, like maybe no McDonald's high performance diet. They're not the same thing. But as the games were unfolding, you could tell the athletes that were finished with their events were in line for McDonald's. Even my teammates, I'll have to say, that night after our medal ceremony and all the interviews, everything, and we finally wound down and we were starving. We're like, we're going to McDonald's. I was like, you guys really, that's really what we're gonna do right now. But it was the whole. So, but I will say in London, they did a phenomenal job with the rest of the food. Even though there was a McDonald's in the center, they had it separated in categories by regions of the world. So it was just beautiful. I mean, so basically any athlete from any part of the world could go to their section of the world and get food that agrees with them, that they were already used to, that their system was already used to eating. So I just thought that was lovely and so inclusive and a beautiful thing to do. But it also, for us Americans that, we love to either eat, Asian food or, East Indian food or Spanish food or whatever it might be. It was quite fun because you could go to all the different sections, and they had plant-based options at every single section of the world. I mean, it was unbelievable. I had no idea it was going to be that good. I could eat there every day. I was so sad when it was over.
That sounds amazing.
It was incredible.
Yeah, that's so cool. But hold on, back to the McDonald's. I think one of the things Megan said that made me laugh, she was like, the only athletes that we really saw in the McDonald's before their competition were curlers. Curlers didn't seem to matter so much for them. Of course, she's doing the Winter Olympics, and that made all the sense in the world to me. I just thought that was fantastic. Fantastically funny. Anyway,
Yeah, right.
Let's go ham on dairy now, shall we? Let's take a few minutes and talk
Okay.
about milk. Why not? You see a lot of these Olympians doing ads promoting milk, right? And so McDonald's, they're a big sponsor there. You can get that pretty readily. Was milk all over the place there as well?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I mean, you had access to every dairy product that you could think of. There was plenty of ice cream and there was plenty of yogurt and there was cheese options on everything. And there was, milk and chocolate milk. I mean, it was readily available. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about chocolate milk. This is a claim that just it always seemed bizarre to me even before I became interested in health and nutrition. The
Yeah.
chocolate milk myth, as far as helping your muscles recover after a workout, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. It's milk, but then you dump a whole bunch of sugar in it, right? So even if you don't know that milk by itself is a very sugary substance, you know that when you add a crap ton of sugar to something, it's not going to be
Mhm.
the healthiest thing in the world, yet it's being touted as the ultimate recovery drink. What
Yeah.
is this? Help me understand.
Well, here's why, and they have one part of that correct. Uh, because there's plenty of research surrounding that. Initially, within the first hour after really hard exercise, where you've torn down your muscles and been training for an hour or more, that the first replenishment that you need is glycogen. And then within 30 to 45 minutes after the replenishment of glycogen, because that's what starts is the precipitous to muscle repair, you need to start moving in the protein and then some fats. So that's why they're leaning on it, because yes, there are better forms of sugar than others. Of course, we know that, right? We want to get our sugars in whole fruit sources so that we can have the fiber with it, because might as well have the best, right? And not, like a filtered apple juice, right? Where you're not going to have the fiber. But nonetheless, you need some kind of glycogen or sugar repair to start muscle, recovery and synapse. So they have that right. But what is crazy about all of the rest of it, and you talk about this, plenty of times with Dr. Barnard and Susan Levin with Milky White Lies, is you have this substance, right, that has some essential nutrients, right? Of course it does. It's to grow a baby. So all breast milk of any mammal, right, it's got some qualities, and it's got some protein and some carbohydrates and some fat, right, and some nutrients, because it has to. But it comes in this package where with these really nasty deleterious effects to the human body, right? Because it's made for a bovine, it's not made for the human body. So it leads to bone breakdown, makes 70% of the world's population quite sick in the form of lactose intolerance. It's continually linked to hormonal-based cancers, especially breast and prostate, as we know, and you guys talk about. I mean, the prostate cancer risk is massive. I think the International Journal of Cancer did a study where if men consumed, the men that consumed 3 or more servings of dairy products a day had a 141% higher risk for death due to prostate cancer compared to those who had less than 1 serving. I mean, that's staggering. That's not like 10% more. It's just monstrous. And I think one of the main things that people are always surprised to learn is, as far as athletes go, is how many athletes suffer from asthma. About 20% of the United States Olympic team in Atlanta in '96 has had asthma. Don't know if they still do. If they gave up dairy, they don't have it anymore. But dairy has been linked in multiple ways, in multiple reviews and studies, to the exacerbation of asthma. So you just have all of these issues that come with it when you could just have a creamy white glass of soy milk. And if you want to add a little sugar to it for glycogen replenishment, then have at it.
Yeah, man. Let me tell you something. There is nothing wrong with a good old fashioned glass of. I'm a mark for unsweetened almond
Mhm.
vanilla almond milk. Unsweetened, it's just like God's nectar to me, and I will drink 2 or 3 glasses of that a day and just be as happy as possible.
Yeah.
Um, the thing though about this chocolate milk thing, and I wanted to know where this first came from, and I was able to trace it back as far as 2010. It was
Mhm.
presented, the idea was at this conference in Baltimore, but the study itself that was being cited was funded by the National Dairy Council and the National Fluid Milk Process
Yes.
Promotion, well, like whatever
Yep.
the heck that is. But so that needs to kind of like sound the alarms a little bit, right? So that's a bit of a red flag there when you know that the Dairy Council is behind a milk study.
Right. I mean, yes and no in terms of the more that I have through doing what I do, the more I dive into studies, the more you realize that most of the studies that come out a certain way are paid for by the people that wanted it to come out a certain way. I mean that's not unheard of. It's quite common. But I know that study that you're talking about, and if you look under the rug at that study, there's two things that are just resoundingly unbelievably ridiculous, and it's so sad that people don't look past the abstract to really see what the issues are with the study. One of the main issues is when they came out and said that chocolate milk is the ultimate recovery drink. What it was compared to in the study was a sports drink and water. So it's not even compared to a nutritionally equivalent like plant source. So soy milk or maybe almond milk. Soy milk has more protein, so they probably, if they could have chosen that, that would have been fair. But first of all, anything with calories is going to win over something with 0 calories, which is water. Like period. A mouthful of dirt is going to win over water. Scott, you got a few calories there. But then comparing it to a sports drink, you're obviously not comparing apples to apples. And people think when a study comes out and it says this is the ultimate recovery beverage because of these reasons, that it's been compared to something that is equivalent. And then when you even look deeper into the study on the subjects that they used, they tested 7, that's it, not 70, not 17, 7 white Irishmen. So well, there's all sorts of issues with that, right? Like, so they obviously were hand selected to not be lactose intolerant. So to say this is a great recovery drink for everyone is completely unfair because it's not for the 70% of people that this substance makes sick via lactose intolerant, right? It says in the study 7 men, but we were curious and we emailed them, and the PI of that study got right back to us and he's the one that told us they were white and Irish. So then we knew they had been hand selected to not be lactose intolerant.
Well, heck,
So
I
it's
would have
really
qualified for
misleading.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shoot, yeah, selective data. All right.
Yeah.
Here's another thing, right? So you talk about recovery, and one of the things that I've learned since doing the exam room is that when it comes to recovery, you want anti-inflammatory foods, anti-inflammatory everything, right? If your
Mhm.
muscles are inflamed, you're not going to be able to recover nearly as well. But is dairy not inflammatory? Isn't it?
Yeah, no,
Technically?
well,
Yeah.
it definitely is. I mean, so
Yeah.
first of all, if you're lactose intolerant, but then second of all, the D-galactose and the NEU5GC are the two aspects of dairy that scientists and physicians have told me are the most inflammatory factors. And those are mainly because they're not recognized by the human body. So what happens when something comes in that our body doesn't recognize? It mounts a defense system in the form of inflammation.
Right. So then
Yeah.
wouldn't that kind of go against the whole idea of chocolate milk being
Yeah.
recovery fuel?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
You're winning right now.
Mhm.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to win. I'm on a podcast with you, for goodness sakes, man. I gotta keep pace with you. Uh, One of the things that you mentioned on the Switch for Good website as well was blood flow, right? And I would imagine that's critical for athletic performance as well. But you consume a lot of fat that comes with the dairy that's going to restrict blood flow as well
Yeah.
over the long haul. Like that's really going to set you back as well, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's what's so confusing about the dietary guidelines is they have come out finally in the last, 5 years, really taking a pretty strong stance on how bad saturated fat is for us and how many issues it creates and causes in the human body. Yet they still promote dairy, which is the biggest source of saturated fat in the American diet. So that just doesn't align at all. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
saturated fat bad.
Little
Yeah,
contradictory there, just
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah.
But yeah, I tell you what. You know what? You brought up the Milky White Lies episode, and if you haven't heard that, or if you haven't checked that out on YouTube yet, you really should. That's where Dr. Barnard and Susan Levin, the wonderful dietitian, and we went on the Dairy Board website and looked at all of their health claims, the facts about milk as they put it, and we just fact checked those facts. Yeah, lots of skewed science there. Next time we do that, I'm going to rope you into that because I think that you would have a field day with that.
It's depressing to go on that site, but I've been on it, and yeah. I don't know how they sleep at night. But they do.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, because they know how skewed it all is. I mean, they know that it's disgusting.
I will tell you the interesting thing though is, and this is a straight shot, just going off script. Some of the criticism that we receive is like, well, you guys do the same thing with your studies and you cherry pick the data. And I can tell you for a fact that is not happening. We give it to you straight. And a lot of the nutrition studies that you see out there that come from the supposed plant-based community, and I'm going to put that in quotes because that's what the critics do. Those are straight shooting studies,
Yeah,
and
you and I don't have anything to gain.
No,
right? We're not selling anything.
No.
So I'm not. You're not. Physicians Committee and Switch for Good are a nonprofit, so we're just trying to sell the truth, but we're not getting any money no matter what we're going to spend if we were to spend some, so that I think you have to really kind of look behind, how much money there is to be made. They're selling a product.
That piques the reporter in me. Makes me want to go do a little investigative report and follow that money trail.
There you go.
Follow
the dollar.
Back to the games in Tokyo. You know what I would love? I would love this so much if one of our marathon runners was eating a plant-based diet, right? Because we hear so much about how vegan endurance athletes just perform so optimally. And I think that would be such a home run if we could get somebody on that particular team to eat a plant-based diet. I think that would be gangbusters.
Yeah, I think some of the track and field, I heard snippets and smatterings of conversations about predominantly plant-based diets with some of the athletes in the 5K and 10K. But I haven't heard anything for the marathon. It's just, we're kind of moving into an era where so many athletes are starting to get this memo and learning like, oh, this could actually be a performance advantage, that I'm fairly curious to know if there's some that are just not sharing their secret.
It could be. Yeah.
Because we used to not, back in the day, I didn't know that this was going to be a performance enhancer. So I wasn't quiet about it, but now I might be. But other ways that I was training, I definitely didn't share.
Yeah.
It's like it's your little like secret toolbox of how you're going to be better than the next. So I'm quite curious about that because I think it's possibly quite a bit more athletes than we know about.
Got to keep that edge. That edge.
Yeah.
And so speaking about the number of athletes that are doing this now, your roster with the Eat Like an Olympian campaign, in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask you about that. It's a who's who, and there are some gigantic names on that list. So I'm really excited about what you have cooking there. But before we go over there, there's two more things that I want to hit with you. One is something that you just tipped me off to right before we began this interview, was what's happening with this gentleman by the name of Mark Cavendish over at the Tour de France. Like this guy is really raising some eyebrows because of his story. So Sell it with the same passion that you told it to me 20 minutes ago, because I was like, knock me over with the feather surprise with this.
Yeah, well, no, this is one of those examples of, just I don't know why it's not more of a thing. It's not being talked about more in the mainstream media or even coming out of his own mouth. But Mark Cavendish is from Wales. He's a British cyclist, and he is an absolutely extraordinary talent, a phenomenal sprinter, was winning stages in the Tour de France in the mid 2000s, just collecting it like you would just dust balls, like just easy peasy. It looked like, of course it wasn't, but and then he just started kind of fallen apart, or he couldn't get out of his own way, like we like to say in cycling. So for the past, I'd say 5 years, maybe 6, like he just was unheard of. Like no one knew where he was, and he couldn't get on a team, and he just, he wasn't winning races. And I thought he'd retired, quite frankly. Well, anyway, long story short, in this year's Tour de France, he is on a team who is not paying him. They said, "No, we don't have a salary for you this year," because he just was really sucking it up the last 5 or 6 years, and so they didn't, put any stock into it and didn't pay him anything. He said, "No problem, I can take care of it. I don't, necessarily need a salary." He's racing against guys who their salaries are $1 to $5 million bucks. Anyway, he came out like gangbusters, and he started winning a couple of sprint stages. And today, so it's July 9th, when this is going to air, he won a stage of the Tour, which is his 34th stage win, which now makes history because it puts him in level with Eddie Merckx, who is really the most legendary, greatest cyclist of all time. He's a Belgian cyclist back in the 70s. And he won 34 stages of the Tour de France. So if Mark can pick up one more stage, that makes history, 35 stages of the Tour de France. But here's what's so special. Miraculously, about a year and a half ago, he went plant-based with his whole family.
There it is.
Yes. So you guys just have to Google him. He has like this meatless like YouTube show. He has a hotel in the UK that the restaurant is, I think, I want to think it's 100% vegan, but it's almost all vegan. I don't know if it's 100%. I don't want to misquote that. His whole family went vegan. They said for planet Earth. So his wife and his kids, and they do these cooking videos, and he's really, really quite open about it. And I would say it's the key that unlocked him back to the top step of the podium. So I wish NBC was chatting about his plant-based diet a little bit more, but obviously that plays a huge role into why he is now back on the top step. He completely changed his whole diet over.
Oh, that's so cool. That's such a cool story. The fact that he's pedaling for free, just for the love of the sport, and is at the top of his game once again, it's incredible to me. And I don't think that he'll be pedaling for free much longer.
No,
given the results.
I guarantee you, he has a massive contract. He is signed yesterday, probably even before this win today, but definitely after today for I'm sure he's got a 2 or 3 year deal on the table. And he was definitely not going to be selected by the Great Britain Olympic team prior to these wins, but now there's no way they can't take him, because the road race in Tokyo is it's a little bumpy, but there aren't any big climbs, and so it could very easily end in a sprint. And that's the guy they want to take.
Mark, get it done, Mark. Typically, I'll root for Team USA, but I'm cheering for Mark this go around. And so one more, and then we're going to talk Eat Like an Olympian. But your Olympic moment, I was unaware that you were in the middle of royalty, both actual royalty and music royalty. So talk to us a little bit about what that was like, because, oh my God, Paul McCartney, that is all.
I know, right? Well, and I didn't know till after, I didn't really realize what was going on during. So we, in London, we beat the Australians by 8/100ths of a second to take us into the gold medal round. And we raced for gold against Great Britain. And like you said earlier, I have a silver, so that tells you how that went. So track cycling is just like all the rage. It pretty much all through Europe, but especially in Great Britain. And so it was standing room only. It was like my husband had to get my family's tickets like literally on the black market. It was like the hottest ticket in town. And so he was like in alleyways the night before, like at 2 a.m, getting my family tickets to be able to come.
That's
So it was
sketchy. That's
super,
sketchy.
yeah. I don't know what, I think he paid a lot, but anyway, we needed the fam bam there. Right. So, crazy, just hottest ticket. And the Prince and Princess were there and Paul McCartney was there. Like I said, I didn't know that until like a bit after, like not before our race, but it was just, you and I were talking about the focus that you have as an athlete and that tunnel that you go into, you know, we call it the cave. And I remember, you know, getting, walking up the track to get clipped in to start that gold medal ride. And the whole track was moving. It was literally moving underneath me to a degree where I thought, this is, I think the building that might implode. Like, is this safe to race? Because it was so loud and they were beating the bleachers and their seats and everything in such a crazy, you know, they were just hysterical. So, but as an athlete, you don't really, you know, couldn't really hear the volume. I just remember staring at the crowd and thinking, this is insane. But after the race, they won, obviously. And, they started playing Hey Jude, and then Paul McCartney came up on the big screens and he was there and he started singing it. And it was a whole British moment that we weren't too much a part of, but it was kind of like, whoa, this is, oh, and I'm like, oh, that's cute. They've beamed in Paul McCartney. And it's like, wait a minute, that's like section G4. He's right there. So it was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, man. File that under that just happened. Holy crap. That's amazing, man. What a moment. And there are going to be so many moments in Tokyo as well. And Eat Like an Olympian. Like, I'm stoked for this. You don't have to be an athlete participating in the games to eat like an Olympian. You guys have this cooked up over at Switch for Good. Talk to us a little bit about what you have going on with that.
Yeah. Well, you know, the point of this is really just to have a really damn good time and win some prizes and really get a window into what plant-based nutrition looks like for these Olympians that are competing in Tokyo. And then many of the Olympians that have been a part of our work since the beginning that are retired, but, you know, 3-time gold medalists in soccer and whatnot. So we have like a competition challenge that's a bingo board where you have to like complete a challenge every day. It's going to run from opening ceremonies to closing ceremonies, so July 23rd to August 8th. And if you sign up, which is super easy on switchforgood.org, it's just right on the homepage. There's all sorts of discounts to our amazing food partners and prizes, but also really specific to just the people that sign up. Window look into what these athletes are eating, what they're eating to recover, what they're eating pre-workout, what they're eating at night before, you know, what kind of, you know, food that is. And I just want to say, you don't have to eat the volume of food. Like, I recognize when we plan this out, I had this thought of, eat like an Olympian. People are going to think they're going to get fat because they know that we eat like, so you don't have to go with the volume. It's really understanding the types of plant-based foods that they're choosing at different parts in the day, depending on what their output is and what their workout looks like, and helping people to really learn the power of the nutrients in plants, right? Like, nitric oxide in beets. We were talking about blood flow earlier. 14% increase in endurance if you eat a cup of beets before an endurance event, exercise, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to hone in on really specific nutrients as we go throughout, but you're going to be able to see the menus of these athletes and all the different sports that they're in, whether it's a strength-based sport or more of an endurance-based sport. So it's set up so that we just have a lot of fun and people can win a lot of cool stuff, but really, really learn in the process and how they can apply all that nutrition advice to their own lives to feel better.
And listen to me, roomies. This is exciting, and it's not small potatoes, right? This isn't some small little thing that's happening. No, 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 no. Dotsie, you guys expect to reach like 10 million people like through your advertising campaign. So like that is an
That's our goal.
enormous pool. Like, so yeah, get in on this. Like that's a fierce competition. If you're in there with 10 million people, for goodness sakes, like, I mean, you got to be throwing bows, like the healthiest bows possible, man. But daggone it, man. If I'm going in, I'm going for the gold, Dotsie. I'm going for gold.
Good. All right. Good. Well, get signed up.
But some of the names. So your partner Olympians, Rachel Adams, bronze volleyball. You, of course, Heather Mitz, three-time Olympic gold medalist in soccer. That soccer team, the women's soccer team, man, they love some plant-based eating, don't they?
They do. It's like they talk about getting the memo. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's 6 or 7 of them on the team that are plant-based.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And I believe if they win gold at the Olympics, it's going to be the first team, male or female, in history to have won the World Cup and the Olympics in the same year. Quote year, because I think that the World Cup was at the end of 2020, if I'm not. So it's within the same 12 months. That's what I'm trying to say. So yay, go USA.
History, yeah.
Yeah.
Allie Riley's on the team, Alex Morgan. I mean, Alex Morgan, it doesn't get bigger than that. And then you look over at basketball, Sue Bird, for goodness sakes. Sue freaking Bird is legendary on the basketball
court. And
court.
She's dairy free.
Yeah.
She's not entirely vegan, but she'll get there. But she is very vocally dairy free. She's most likely lactose intolerant. I don't know, but most likely, and just talks quite a bit about her dairy free eating. So
that's
cool.
Fantastic.
Go Mama Cows.
Get
him, girl.
She won't be recovering with the chocolate milk. No.
Gross.
Yeah.
No.
Well, daggone, you got a lot going on. I love it. How's the Switch for Good podcast coming?
Oh, you know what? I just love doing it with Alexandra. Like, we just love it so much. And it's just such a special way to reach an audience that wants and needs this information and is curious and excited about learning. And, I mean, just, it's so fun having all the different guests on from all different walks of life and just, being exposed to all of their brilliance and suggestions to make our lives better. So it's going great. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's the coolest. And to this day, it was one of my favorite interviews that I've ever given, was when I had the opportunity to hop on with you guys.
You were phenomenal. Like, you were one of my favorite of all time of having on. I mean, you were just such an open book. You were so self-effacing and just so real and raw. And I just know that you helped thousands and thousands of people. And if people listening haven't heard his episode and don't, they know your story probably if they're listening to this podcast, but I mean, the nitty gritty stuff that maybe you haven't told on this. I mean, you went all out for us, and it was beautiful to hear.
Well, I appreciate you guys. Yeah, let me tell the full story, because there are definitely components to it that I do not talk about on this show. But you gave me an avenue to do that. So super, super grateful for that. And you guys are just doing extraordinary things on that show with Switch for Good, the Eat Like an Olympian campaign. And you just bring a whole bunch of good energy into the world too. So I could talk to you all day, but like we're out of time for this one, but standing invite whenever you want to come back and just shoot the breeze. I mean, come on, anytime. I love this so much.
Thanks. I'm glad we got to do this right around the Olympic time, and get people stoked about this. It's going to be a fun couple weeks of competition. So even with empty stands, we'll be on our couches cheering really loud. Maybe they'll hear us.
Make the voices carry. Make them carry. No. Dotsie Bausch, thank you so much for just being you.
Thanks, Chuck. That's very kind.
If your health IQ is a couple of points higher than it was a few minutes ago, go ahead and like this video or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And to take it even higher, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your favorite shows. Look for The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. Hit the subscribe button there as well, and help to make your world a healthier place.